should hear it. Incidentally, you're about to hear a government where this is really something else. Now, would anybody in our government do this? No way. But the gentleman you're about to hear, Nick Pope, from Great Britain, has worked for the Ministry of Defense since 1985. And he's going to come on the air with us. And he's going to talk about UFOs. He's going to talk about open skies, closed minds, and the uninvited. Actually, the author of his book. But for somebody to be able to come on from the government, particularly in Great Britain, is shocking to me. And I'll tell you more about him in a moment. With the Kennedy tragedy, somebody sent me this, and I thought it worth reading to you. The sky is overcast and the visibility poor. The reported 5-mile visibility looks more like 2, and you can't judge the height of the overcast. Your altimeter says you are at 1,500 feet, but the map tells you there's local terrain as high as 1,200 feet. There might even be a tower nearby because you're not sure just how far off course you might be, but you've flown into worse weather than this, so you press on. You find yourself unconsciously easing back just a bit on the controls to clear those none too imaginary towers. With no warning whatsoever, you're in the soup. You peer so hard into the milky white mist that your eyes hurt. You fight the feeling in your stomach. You swallow only to find your mouth dry. Now you realize you should have waited for better weather. The appointment was important, but not that important. Somewhere a voice is saying, you've had it. It's over. Now you have 178 seconds to live. Your aircraft feels on an even keel, but your compass turns slowly. You push a little rudder, add a little pressure on the original position. This feels better, but your compass is now turning a little faster and your airspeed is increasing slightly. So you scan your instrument panel for help. But what you see looks somewhat unfamiliar. You're sure this is just a bad spot. You'll break out just a few minutes, but you don't have several minutes left. You now have 100 seconds to live. So you glance at your altimeter, and you're shocked to see it unwinding. You're already down 1,200 feet. Instinctively, you pull back on the controls, but the altimeter still unwinds. The engine is in the red, the airspeed nearly so. Now you have 45 seconds to live. You're sweating and shaking. There must be something wrong with the controls. Pulling back only moves that airspeed indicator further into the red. You can hear the wind tearing at the aircraft. Now you have 10 seconds to live. Suddenly you see the ground. The trees rush up at you. You can see the horizon if you turn your head far enough, but it's at an unusual angle. You're almost inverted. You open your mouth to scream. You have no seconds left. The author of that, by the way, is unknown. I imagine that caused a bead of sweat or two on the brow of some pilots out there. So, we're about to go to Great Britain, and we're going to speak with a government employee whose name is Nick Pope. It's an unusual opportunity. Just got back from Taiwan and China, and this is interesting. I was talking to him a little earlier. This just cleared the wires. The U.S. 7th Fleet is now monitoring the Taiwan Strait as special envoys meet in Beijing to persuade officials to avoid military means to solve the unification issue. And for the second Bill Clinton warned the mainland against using force, while at the same time the president has stated he does support the one-China policy. So, I don't know, you better watch that area very carefully. I smell trouble there. Is a controversial figure whose outspoken views on UFOs newspapers, led to questions being asked in Parliament. His endorsement of an extraterrestrial explanation led to conflict with others at the department. I can imagine that. He has worked for the Ministry of Defense since 1985, and his postings have included a tour of duty in the Joint Operations Center during the Gulf War. He holds the rank of Higher Executive Officer, which equates roughly to that for us of a major in the Army. Through his work on UFOs, alien abductions and such, Nick got drawn into looking at crop circles, animal mutilations, and a range of other paranormal phenomena. This resulted in him being likened to the character of Fox Mulder, of course, in the X-Files. He has written a book called Open Skies, Closed Minds, which reached number 3 in the Sunday Times hardback nonfiction list and stayed, in fact, in the top 10 for 10 weeks. The Uninvited, also another and a bestseller. He has written a techno-thriller with an alien theme entitled Operation Thunderchild, which is going to be published in October of '99 by Simon & Schuster, UK Simon & Schuster. He's done many, many radio and television interviews, and here from the United Kingdom is Nick Pope. Nick, welcome to the program.
Thanks.
Gee, where to begin? First of all, I didn't think that any government official there or here was allowed to talk about this sort of thing.
It is very difficult for me to speak out on these sorts of issues. What actually helped me in a kind of perverse way was the fact that after the Persian Gulf War, all the generals had written their memoirs using official information and talking about their involvement in the war. So I came in after that, and I thought, well, if these generals can write about their experiences, I'm going to write about mine, because I think that the UFO and abduction research that I did at the ministry would be interesting to people, and I was right.
Interesting is to put it mildly, but now here, help me if I'm wrong here, but I always thought, here in America we have this all-encompassing or nearly all-encompassing First Amendment that allows people to speak out on things. In Great Britain, the national government actually can and does at times censor information, exercising what we call prior restraint here in the United States, not allowing certain things to be broadcast. Can you speak on that?
Yes, we do have a fairly draconian piece of legislation called the Official Secrets Act here,
yes.
which does make this sort of thing difficult. But there is a fundamental change, and has been for several years. There is a philosophy of open government that has been with us for, say, the last 4 or 5 years, and indeed proposals for a historic British Freedom of Information Act have now been published, and we should have that in a year or two's time.
Okay,
so
things
are going the right way.
Yes, you work for the Ministry of Defense, which is the same thing, really, as working for the Defense Department here in the U.S., isn't it?
That's right.
So it's unimaginable to me that they would let you speak out on things like this unless, I'm going to say what the audience would say,
okay,
unless you were sort of towing the line for them, as it were.
Well, I'll be honest with you. What I had to do to stay the right side of the line
yes.
is let the department see a copy of my manuscripts before I published. Now, that's not to say that what came out the other side should be regarded as approved by the government, but it gave them the chance to take out anything that I had put in inadvertently that was, say, classified, and make 1 or 2 other changes. But I must say that, you know, this was very minor changes. They did not tamper with the overall thesis
so
that I was putting forward.
I take it then on occasion you have had sentences or paragraphs deleted, thank you very much.
That's right, yes, and I'm quite happy. I would rather pay that price and have some information come out than have the whole thing stop. Although I would say to you that suitable amendment. But following that, there was a lot of politics, a lot of talking, a lot of arguing, and life got pretty interesting. Considered to be really good evidence of extraterrestrial craft, things that could do things we couldn't even come close to. These people just put their head in the sand and said, it must be a weather balloon, it must be a hoax, you know, you must have made a mistake.
Gee, that sounds just like our Air Force. Exactly like our Air Force.
Well, although the interesting thing is that in Britain, our Air Force here, the Royal Air Force, is actually, I think, a very positive force. And many of the people that I've spoken to in the Air Force here actually believe in UFOs, but don't really feel too comfortable about coming out and saying so. Now, of course, the main reason, and I'm sure that isn't the case in the States as much as it is here, many Air Force people have had sightings themselves, but because of fear of ridicule, because they worry that it's real sometimes, they tend not to say anything. I had a lot of people talk to me just, you know, in the margins. We would be going to a course or something, and someone would take me aside and say, look, Nick, when I was flying my jet, you know, back in...
Many of them violating our airspace in what might be called an invasion. Not real likely. So we've got a real prize here. I'm Art Bell, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Is coming to us from London, England, Great Britain. He is in the Ministry of Defense, where he's been since 1985, and he speaks out on issues that you wouldn't imagine he could speak out on there, but he does. I want to start off with a couple.
Okay.
We have had a lot of reports here, Nick, of gigantic craft. I mean, really big craft that has been seen by commercial airliners and others approaching the Atlantic Ocean, generally from Europe, from where you are, roughly, to and we've had report after report after report of this. I think even something that NATO reported on. What do you know about this, if anything?
Well, I certainly have lots of cases, both officially and now privately, involving pilots in UFOs. And our Civil Aviation Authority here has cases of near misses being reported between the
I'm sure you're aware of the non-near misses that occurred in Mexico, where actually a couple of collisions.
Yes, that's right. But again, though, I think we have chronic under-reporting of this. That every pilot who speaks out and goes official, I think there are at least 10, and I say that with some experience because I've sat in this job doing it, 10 who don't report at all. And that worries me because irrespective of what you believe on UFOs, there is a flight safety issue here. And I just hope we don't have a massive tragedy to bring this home to people.
Well, one might even wonder whether we might already have had a massive tragedy. And there's air crashes out there that despite the best investigation of the NTSB here, or your counterpart there, are never really quite solved.
That's right, and I guess, of course, there are one or two historic UFO cases like Thomas Mantell and Frederick Valentich, which, continue to perplex people and make people slightly anxious about what's going on in our sky.
And I know it might be useful if you would relate that one to us. I don't know if it's familiar to me.
Well, the Frederick Valentich case, a very interesting one, where a light aircraft pilot was flying across Tasman Strait between Australia and Tasmania, and he reported having seen an object. This was back in 1968. He reported that an object was kind of buzzing his plane, and his last message was control. He was actually on the radio trying to get some help. And this is a direct quote. He said, "My intentions are to go to King Island, Melbourne." He said, "That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft." Now, that was the last transmission. The aircraft and the pilot were never found.
Wow.
So, cases like this are not as widely known as they should be. I mean, a lot of ufologists, will have a passing familiarity with them, but if you go out to the public and say, what if I were to tell you that a UFO had been directly responsible for the loss of an aircraft and death of a pilot? The public would think you were making it up, and yet it's not. The air traffic control report is there. This is all on the record.
In America, Nick, the U.S. Air Force conducted its great Project Blue Book, at the end of which they said whatever these things are, they are not a threat to national security, as if to have the final word said on the whole thing, not a threat to national security. And yet, in this country, Nick, we have reports of UFOs that have hovered above ICBM hardened installations. We have reports of ICBM sites that have gone offline with UFOs hovering above them. The Russians have had reports of ICBM sites beginning their own countdown. That aired here on national television. And I've always thought, Nick, if that is not a matter of national, in fact, international security, then what is?
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think, let's not beat around the bush. I mean, Blue Book was, a pretty much a whitewash. And the American government's decision to get out of the UFO game, if they did, was pretty perverse, given that over 20% of the Blue Book cases were unexplainable. And I'm not talking about cases where there was insufficient data. But yeah, we have near misses between UFOs and aircraft, some of which are military aircraft. We here have cases involving UFOs hovering over power stations and even nuclear installations on occasion. Yeah, I think that this is an issue of extreme defense significance, and that is fundamentally the reason why I wrote the book. And yes, I was taking a chance in doing it, but I felt that it was just too important to sit back and do nothing when these things are going on.
Well, again, since you work for the Ministry of Defense, without giving me specifics about the things that you cannot talk about, how many cases or incidences have occurred that, percentage-wise, Nick, that you would not be able to tell me about right now?
Well, I could pretty much tell you about most of the cases, although some in fairly sanitized form. What I can say to you is that when I was doing the UFO job for the government, I investigated about 300 cases a year. And of those cases, I reckon about 10%, so maybe 30 cases a year, gave me serious cause for concern, made me think we were dealing with structured craft capable of speeds and maneuverability.
When you were tasked with the job, were you given any instructions with regard to the desired outcome of your investigations to come?
I wasn't given anything specific, but I think there was a kind of culture, a kind of general perception that this was a subject that it didn't do to look into too closely. It was regarded either as a nuisance or as something where once you started digging, who knows where it will end. So I'm not telling you that I was ever warned off or discouraged or anything like that, but I think it was kind of accepted that, whoever did that job was just supposed to kind of not rock the boat.
All right. Well, I want to just go off to the right here for a second and ask you a question that you might not be able to answer. But you had a tour of duty in the Joint Operations Center during the Gulf War.
Yes.
And a pretty significant one. In America, we have a great controversy raging, Nick, about our GIs who came back and are complaining of various and sundry ailments called the Gulf War Syndrome. And I wonder if there is a similar thing going on in Great Britain, and if so, what you know about it.
There is indeed a similar controversy, but I'm afraid that's not something on which I can comment. It's nothing. I have not done any official research or investigation into that, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to pass up that one.
Okay.
The perils of working for the government, I'm afraid.
No. I understand, and sometimes it is as important to get a no comment as it is to get one. Now, coming back to ufology for a moment, there's more than just things in our skies. I understand, though we're not getting any publicity about it, or very little here, with regard to this year's crop circle formation, it's quite astounding there in Great Britain, in Europe generally, and we're not hearing about it over here.
I think, particularly, I mean, I can only speak for the British media, but the British media are still totally hung up on the Doug and Dave fiasco.
Really?
And there's a perception that it's all a hoax.
Yes, but hasn't Doug or Dave or one of them died?
I forget which one. I've been kind of out of the crop circle business for a while. I mean, I've been concentrating more on abduction research of late. But,
right.
I mean, of course, it was inconceivable that Doug and Dave, and even their imitators, were ever responsible for all these patterns. But the media can sometimes be very one-dimensional on this.
Oh, boy.
And I just got sucked into the whole idea that because Doug and Dave fooled a few people, they must be responsible for everything, which is clearly nonsense.
Actually impossible. I've seen the size and complexity of some. Well,
I stood in some myself. I stood in the double helix formation in Alton Barnes, and I stood in the famous formation at Stonehenge as well. And in fact, I was one of the first people in that while it was still very fresh, before people had started trampling it down. And yeah, they are awesome.
Well, you know, here we have Dr. Levengood, who does very serious research on the molecular changes that occur in, quote, real, end quote, crop circles. And there are, in fact, actual molecular changes that would seem to be mimicked by, but not quite an effect that would be produced by microwave radiation. Is that what you generally think there?
I don't know on this. I've heard speculation even that the government could be responsible for some of these by testing some sort of projected energy weapon. I mean, which theory?
You'd be a very good person to ask about that.
No, I can tell you on that that's not the solution, because if the government had something like that, you can bet that the one place they wouldn't test it is in public. When the Ministry of Defense, and I'm sure in America the Defense Department, has acres of its own land, you know, we would do this sort of stuff behind closed doors. So I think, as far as I'm concerned, I can eliminate that.
We do not have projected energy weapons in orbit. Is that a definitive statement on your part, or?
No, it's My statement was that I do not believe a projected energy weapon could be tested, or would be tested rather, by making a pattern on a crop field. I'm not saying that we don't have these things, and it's very interesting looking at some of the things going on at White Sands at the moment, that there are various anti-ballistic missile systems, both missiles and indeed lasers being tested.
Nick, have you ever seen the controversial footage from STS-80, the shuttle flight STS-80?
Yes, I have.
Did you notice that a moment when the shuttle camera obviously and intentionally zoomed in on a specific area and waited? Obviously waited. And then something that must have been some sort of projected energy weapon or possibly a craft at incredible speeds obviously left the Earth. You saw that, didn't you?
Yes, I did, yes.
What do you think that was, Nick?
Well, the honest answer is I don't know. I think I can tell you what it isn't. I'm convinced that it's not ice crystals falling off the shuttle.
Wasn't ice crystals, no.
Nor was it a weather balloon, nor was it swamp gas.
When I saw that, actually, I can tell you that I had in my house some time ago, without naming who it is, and I can't, somebody who was directed energy.
Right. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, of course, you know, we know that there are various kinetic energy anti-satellite laser systems being tested. So maybe that's what it is. I've seen some people who say, "Oh my God, we've declared war on the UFO. We're trying to shoot a UFO down." Now, I very much doubt that that's the case. But yeah, I'm sure we've got all sorts of exotic hardware that we were maybe testing ourselves.
I've got a man named David Jacobs coming on the air with me next week. I've invited him back. He wrote a book, Nick, called The Threat. And the suggestion is that when you look at what these visitors, if we can call them that, all the rest of it, what they are, these are not friends of ours. These are not beings who are well-intended toward us.
I would have to agree with that.
Really?
I've specialized in abduction research in recent years, and in fact I've put a lot of new cases into the uninvited, and my general perception is that, yeah, these are not friendly people, and the things that have been done are not good things, and they are not being done with our consent. There is no permission granted. These procedures are intrusive, and yeah, that is not a good thing. So I agree with Dave Jacobs. I agree with people like Bud Hopkins on this. That I'm not saying there aren't some good cases, and I'm not saying there aren't some people who, derive a positive New Age benefit from this. But fundamentally, these are not good things.
That would be my conclusion as well, or at least I'm certainly not prepared to say that they're all warm and fuzzy and we should welcome them. I'm recalling Independence Day, the movie, and I thought the first half of that movie was very compelling because in that movie the aliens did not want to make a deal with us. They didn't want our gold. They didn't want our women. They only wanted us to die. The movie kind of went downhill from I thought we saw the Area 51 baloney. But, you know, the first part of that, I thought that could be quite realistic one day. In other words, they really wouldn't want anything except for us to be off this planet entirely.
Yes, whatever they're doing, I don't think they're doing it for us. Because if they were, they would ask. or they would tell us. They are pursuing their own agenda, and because they do it with attempts to cover their tracks, this is a covert alien agenda. And, you know, from someone who's looked at things from a kind of government and military point of view,
Yes.
when someone sneaks around and does things behind your back, covertly, that's always a bad thing.
Well, you actually don't work for the Ministry of Defense, so government awareness, or a deal had been made, or contact already has been made, you should know about it, shouldn't you, Nick?
Well, some people have called me press officer for the cover-up. No, it's not true, no. You know, I've been accused of all sorts of things because I agree it is an unlikely that someone in my position would come forward with these views.
And would not know.
And would not know. I think
Here.
I would say that's true here too.
In Europe as well?
Yes.
Interesting. We've got the ozone to contend with. We've got big ice fields beginning to break off at the Antarctic. We've got all kinds of indicators of trouble in the environment with small species, with trouble in the ocean with the plankton, trouble in the ocean with all kinds of things, some oceans dying, real serious trouble in the environment. And a lot of people think if there is something going on, it is related to what's happening right now. Yes.
No, I read the report on it. I certainly agree that to an extent, yes, witnesses are fallible and witnesses make mistakes.
Of course.
And with the passing of time, people's memories become clouded. I think that's human nature. Applies to everything, not just UFOs. But I don't think you can wave a magic wand and explain the entire Roswell incident in those terms. And I think they did themselves a disservice by trying to bring in the kind of high-altitude parachute test business with the dummies and things like that.
I thought the same thing. In other words, it was as if they were trying to, at least the end effect of this news conference was to fire the whole subject up, not put it away.
Well, it certainly was very embarrassing the way that people came back, I think within a matter of hours, or if not hours, days, and said, hey, but those tests with the dummies didn't begin until, what was it, 52, something like that.
Quite right.
So right straight away, the whole case had been undermined. And at the, maybe that's careless, but who knows? I mean, I've written press briefs myself, and again, without wanting to criticize, it's not the way I would have done it if I'd have wanted to close a case.
One more thing. Again, going back to these craft, these very large craft that commercial aircraft have reported to be as big as football fields or bigger, traversing the North Atlantic at incredible speeds. Does your government have any additional information? I mean, reports of pilot sightings and that kind of thing. Pilots have seen them, and they call them fast walkers, I believe. But nobody.
Yeah, the amazing thing about this was that when I first became aware of these things, through the embassies, we asked the American government, well, what do you know about this? Is this something that you're operating, or do you know about it?
Yeah.
They fired back and said, no, is it one of yours?
Nick, how good and at what depth do you think your government and my government communicate on this subject? Or can you not talk about that?
I don't know on that. My impression is that if there is contact, it's unofficial. Some things are perhaps, however special the relationship, are always going to be held nationally. As we like to say, the only way to keep a secret is not to tell anybody.
All right, I would like to bring some people on and let them ask you questions if you're up for that.
Yeah, fine.
I mean, it really is rather unusual. Do you know of any other governments that have a counterpart like yourself that is made available for interviews like the one we're doing right now?
I don't know, but I mean, of course, I should say that I'm not speaking as an official spokesperson here. I mean, that my official government research is something that I did for much of the early 90s, but not anymore. So this is not an official statement. But of course, it's not the first time that somebody involved with government UFO research has spoken out. And
but it's really got to be said, Nick, that if they didn't want you here right now, you wouldn't be here.
Okay, but I mean, people in America, for example, people like Ruppel spoke out, and he'd been involved and headed up Blue Book for a couple of years.
It's true, but generally here in America, the speaking up occurs after the retirement.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair point.
Colonel Corso, for example, so many others, after retirement, never while they're currently in active service. That's very unusual. All right, well, let's go to the phones and see what we've got here. On the wild card line, you're on the air with Nick Pope in London. Hello.
Hi, Art. This is Andy from Largo, Florida.
Yes, sir.
Question, Doctor. In your opinion, does extraterrestrial engineering play any kind of influence in our propulsion systems? And we're still using fuel and rivets and stuff like that. So you hear stories about these spacecraft being built like as if they're one mold, no riveting whatsoever. So that obviously has to play a part of it. But when, in your opinion, will we see anti-gravity systems where we won't need to burn fuel?
All right. Really, it's quite a good question, Nick. In other words, do you believe that your government or my government, our government here, are in possession of any craft that there are propulsion systems out there now that we're using of the sort he described?
Again, the truthful answer, because I have no direct knowledge, is I don't know. I have to say there are some cases which suggest that might be so. If you look, I guess, back to the Cash Lantern incident in 1980, it appeared that a craft of some sort was escorted by a number of military helicopters. I have a case involving a UFO sighting in February 93 NASA actually placed a research contract for an anti-gravity study. Now, that didn't come from a UFO magazine. That was in, I think, the scientific journal, Scientist or Scientific American.
For a UFO study.
Well, not for a UFO study.
Anti-gravity.
Gravity, yeah.
Which is kind of like a UFO. Listen, Nick, do you know where I live? I live in Nevada. Nick, I live about 65 miles from Las Vegas, and just over the mountain range from me is Area 51 and Area S4, where on nearly any given night, you can go up there if you wish, and you can watch things that seem to defy gravity flitting about in the sky in ways that normal aircraft don't. Now, it was some years ago, Nick, and this is absolutely true story. I pulled the car over to the side of the road. We both got out. She came around to the driver's side. And we both 150 feet. It passed directly over our heads. The stars went away, the moon went away, it passed. You could see the solid bottom side of the craft. We watched it float out across the valley for, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes with our mouths open. And it was that close. I mean, it's like I could have taken a rock and thrown it at the damn thing if I wasn't in shock, and I was in shock.
Mm-hmm.
So, if that's not anti-gravity, then I don't know what it is.
Sure. The question, I suppose, is do we have that technology, or was that being piloted by extraterrestrials?
That is the question, yes, indeed.
Yeah, and I kind of tend to think... jets in the air. We'd better be worried about this.
Well, for example, here in the U.S., a number of years ago, in Michigan, we had a particularly striking set of sightings over Lake Michigan, moving towards Chicago, and I have a tape of the radar operator and of the 911 dispatcher and all these calls coming in, and then the weather radar guy saying, "Oh my God! Now there's 2, now there's 3, now they're moving together. They're going at an impossible speed." All of this stuff from the radar fellow that was on the line to the 911 operator. These are very solid reports. I find it beyond reason to believe that our government would not regard an invasion of its airspace, something we zealously protect here and I'm sure there as well, not to be a matter of national security.
I agree. I mean, there was a wave of UFO sightings in New Hampshire in '93, and the local paper ran a front-page story, and in huge letters it said, "If you see a UFO over the Piscataqua River, do not call 911. It is not an emergency." And they were getting so many calls that the system was getting overloaded. But I agree, you know, these things are of extreme defense significance. There are serious defense and national security issues at stake here.
Okay,
until we know what they are.
So then you must understand why so many people are skeptical in my country and yours, at least my country, when our government says they are not a matter of national security.
Yeah, I think the truth of the matter is that if there isn't a cover-up, and I know a lot of people will disagree with that, but if there isn't, the simple truth is that the government doesn't know and cannot control this. And that's one thing governments can't stand, not being in control.
I was just about to say that. That's the only other reasonable explanation. That is that since they cannot control it and cannot tell us what it is, they don't want to scare us by telling us that, so they say it's nothing.
I would tend to agree with that more than I would support a cover-up.
Good morning, Art. Columbia, WBOZ 56. Is the radio station?
Yes, sir.
And I was wondering if Mr. Pope a book that I have heard, not only have I heard about, but I also have a copy of it, by an Englishman named Leslie Watkins. The book is called Alternative. Now, Art, I know that I sent you some information because I think I shared a letter that Mr. Watkins wrote to me when he answered my letter that I wrote to him. And I was just wondering what he would know about Alternative 3 and the stuff that was written in this book. It seems so far out and so out of left field, but as time has progressed on, it seems like I see stuff materializing from this book, like the possibility of the ozone layer. The astronauts were mentioned about what they did or didn't see on the moon.
All right, we're going to take some time this hour. So, Nick, any knowledge about Alternative 3?
Yeah, I mean, my perception, and I'm sorry to kind of say this, is that it was probably a hoax. But if you want to talk to someone here who knows a bit more about that, you'd have to ask someone like Georgina Bruni on the show. She's actually someone who's putting together a book on the Bentwaters incident at the moment that's going to be out next year. But Alternative 3 is something she's looked into. So I might have to pass the buck there.
Sorry.
I don't know enough about it to really comment.
Are you good for one more hour?
Yeah, one more hour I can do.
All right, excellent. Because I do want to ask you about Bentwaters, of course. We couldn't finish the program without doing that, and
sure,
a lot of people want to talk to you, so excellent. Stay right there. My guest is a Ministry of Defense employee, has been so since 1985, specifically studying the kinds of things that we talk about in Great Britain. And it's kind of a little shameful. To me, it's shameful that I've got to call London to get a government employee who will talk about this when I can't call anybody here. We'll be right back. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Listen, your book, by the way, is it available still?
Yes, both Open Skies, Closed Minds and The Uninvited are published in America by the Overlook Press, and The Uninvited has just come out in a mass market paperback through Dell Publishing. So you should be able to get them in the States as
Most
well as here in Britain.
bookstores, or if they don't have them in the bookstores, they can order them.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Nick Pope. Hello there.
Hi, I'm calling from Cincinnati, Ohio, east of the Rockies. I listen to you on 610 out of Columbus, Ohio.
Yes, sir.
And, yes, for Mr. Pope, I had heard you saying a little bit ago that you had said that you had felt that these aircrafts were possibly threats to national security, whereas Art said that the U.S. government stance on it was that they were not threats to national security. My question for you is, just looking at this whole thing and seeing that these beings, quote-unquote beings, if they're this much advanced, if they're this much more advanced than we are, and I'll go so far as to presume that their weaponry is too, that don't you think that if they wanted to take us, they would have already done it?
I think that's right. That's assuming, though, that they're here for a straight kind of Independence Day scenario, a wipeout, a takeover, whatever. But I often like to speculate that the real reasons, their motivation, and indeed their modus operandi are going to be literally alien. So there are going to be things that they do and things that they think that we simply can't understand. And I don't think it's necessarily the case, and this is going to be a controversial idea, I don't think it's necessarily the case that they are as far ahead of us as we think. And that means that there might be things that we could do. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that we get into some sort of shooting war. That would be silly. But we could make things difficult, and we could let it be known that, we are going to take care of our airspace, we're going to police it, and we're going to take care of our people. And we're not going to be happy with people being taken against their will and subjected to these experiences. And things like that. I think we can track these people better than you might think.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
All right, thank you very much for the call. Now, in America, I guess the most famous case is Roswell. In Great Britain, I think the most famous case is Bentwaters. Is that fair to say, or
correct? Yeah,
it is correct. What can you tell us from your position about Bentwaters? What do you know? What investigation of Bentwaters have you done? Have you talked to witnesses? What have you done?
Okay, well, when I took over, the job looking at these UFO sightings for the government, there was a file on the Rendlesham Forest incident, and one of the first things I did in the job is I read this file, and at the end of it, I just thought, my gosh, what the hell happened there? It seemed to me that we had handed to us on a plate, pretty much as much proof and convincing evidence as you could want. And yet, we seem to let this opportunity, for some reason, slip through our fingers. On the face of it, we have an incident in December 1980 where a whole string of United States Air Force personnel witnessed not just lights in the sky, but also at one stage a metallic craft.
On the ground.
Yeah, on the ground.
In the woods.
And, the great thing about this is that it left traces. And always, when I was researching my own cases, I would love it where we could get this kind of secondary evidence, where you could get burn marks, damage, that sort of thing. And this object, and we know it was an object, had a definite effect on the environment. There was tree damage right where the guard patrol said that the craft had been. There were indentations right on the forest floor where this thing had been seen to land. And best of all, they took radiation readings. Now, I reopened the investigation into this case.
Oh?
Of course, it was difficult because it was many years later. But one thing I did is I took those radiation readings and I gave them to the Defense Radiological Protection Service, an official government organization in Britain. And I said, just tell me, I said, is this normal or not? I mean, no one had looked into these readings. No one had compared them to what the levels should have been. I found that incredible. The answer came back, whatever it was 10 times background radiation. So, again, scientific evidence that there was a structured cast there, that it left effect on the I've spoken to people like Larry Warren and Peter Robbins, of course, and I've spoken also at length to Charles Holt. I'm convinced that these people are being truthful. Where I get suspicious is where everyone says exactly the same. I just think it is without question the best case in the country. Now, I'm a great fan of Peter and Larry's book, Left at Eastgate, which I think is excellent.
Yes.
A British called Georgina Bruni is just putting the finishing touches to what I think will be the definitive book on the Bentwaters incident. And her book will be published, I think, next year, pretty much late next year on the 20th anniversary of the incident. So I know that she's going to run and run, and I think on the 20th anniversary with Georgina's book, we're going to see some real resurgence of interest. In a way, I think this case is better than Roswell, because, again, Colonel Haynes was right. Time compression does exist. It is difficult with a case 50 years old where most of the witnesses are dead. Bentwaters, pretty much everyone is still here.
That's true. That's true.
I think it represents possibly our best opportunity to protect the nation.
Okay, let's go for a second before we go into the let's do this. We have something called the Brookings Institute, and they did a study on the probable consequences of contact should it occur and how the American people would react. And it wasn't really good news. In other words, it concluded the American people would react well, that a lot of what they believed in would be challenged, and that there would be general chaos if contact actually were to occur. And I suppose the recommendation was that it's possible the American people would not be told they should not be told. Has there been any similar studies in Great Britain on this subject?
There have been some privately sponsored opinion polls, which tend to suggest, as I think is the case in the States, that belief in an extraterrestrial reality is running pretty high, sometimes over 50%, I think, consistently.
Oh, yes.
Over 50%. I am not sure. Been sidestepped, and this is, to me, from my official background, much more important, is the potential biological hazard from contact.
Of course.
You think about the decimation of various indigenous peoples around the world when they've come into contact with travelers.
Yeah, all we need is the Pleiadian flu.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is an issue which needs to be gripped. We've seen terrible deaths here on Earth. Imagine the potential of two entirely different species from two entirely different ecosystems. happens already during the abduction, but that's during that's a carefully controlled environment.
Well, one has to imagine that might be why there has not been contact yet.
That is a possible inhibitor to that, yes. So it makes the idea of UFO crashes even more disturbing, and perhaps the potential biohazard is one possible reason, and this is only my personal speculation, but why governments, if there had been a crash somewhere, would rush to secure the crash site and immediately seal it off. Not so much to stop the public knowing the truth, but to protect the entire world from a potential hazard which could wipe us all out.
And did a motion picture called Mars Attacks make it to Great Britain?
It did, and I confess that I haven't got round to seeing it.
The town that was destroyed at the beginning of that motion picture was my town.
Right.
Yeah, a little Pahrump, Nevada. And I think that they took a stab of humor at me, but they destroyed the town and the people. It was awful. Catch it when you can. East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Nick Pope. Hi.
Hi.
Oh, you're going to have to yell at us, hon. I don't hear you too well.
I'm sorry. Is it better?
That's a little better.
Okay. I'm calling from Harker Heights, Texas.
Texas, okay.
Yeah, I listen to you on KJFK.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, the question I have is, with the abduction, is it a common thing for people when they've been abducted to come out of it with nosebleeds?
Yes, it is.
Really?
Yeah, I found that in quite a lot of cases. Now, of course, it's difficult to say when children are involved because, of course, for all sorts of very ordinary medical reasons, children get nosebleeds all the time. But what I found is that adults, who have not had a nosebleed for years and years, in the aftermath of say, UFO sightings or abductions, will suddenly get this. And in a way, this is very traumatic. I mean, seeing your own blood, even in a nosebleed, can be very distressing. And I've had abductees. I have several cases where abductees have been almost more upset by the nosebleed than the actual experience.
Now, that's very interesting, ma'am. Why did you ask that question?
Because the other, several years ago, when my 14-year-old was about 2 years old, I had fallen asleep in my car and then woke up in my bedroom, and when I got up, I had this nosebleed. And then just a couple of days ago, I got up and I had another nosebleed. And, it's been years since I've had a nosebleed. Just boom like that.
Well, at one moment being in your car and the next being in your bed, now that's very disturbing. It's strange. Thank you very much. I had not heard of the nosebleed thing before, but a nosebleed might well be because of a pressure change.
It might well be, but I think the more popular theory amongst abduction researchers is that it has to do with either the insertion or removal of an implant. Now, that's something you should ask Whitley about tomorrow, because I know he knows a lot about that. And say hi to him from me, by the way. But,
yes, Whitley, as you well know, has an implant in his ear. I had the surgeon, Nick, who tried to remove this implant on my program, and this surgeon came on and said, look, I took the scalpel and I made a cut and I got close to the implant and the damn thing moved. It literally moved away from the scalpel. And he said, I asked Whitley, should I proceed? And he said yes. And he went in further with the scalpel. And bear in mind, this is a surgeon talking to me. And he said, I got close to it again and it moved again. And at this point, I told Whitley, I'm going to quit. I'm going to sew you back up because I'm going to do you damage if we keep this up.
Yes, it's almost as if, and I've heard these accounts before, it's almost as if they are biomechanical. But certainly, I think, again, it's indicative of the covert nature of what's going on. We are clearly not really supposed to know all about this, so our best efforts to get proof are often thwarted by the controlling intelligence. So this sort of thing does not surprise me. They are covering their tracks, or they're doing their best to.
All right, Nick, hold on. We've got one more segment to go. Nick Pope is here, and he works for the Ministry of Defense in Great Britain. He is in London, even though it sounds like he's right in our backyard. A very, very good phone connection from London. I'm Art Bell, and this, of course, is Coast to Coast AM. Don't touch that dial. Nick Pope is here, and we'll get right back to the phone. Just a quick little item from the New York Times. Yesterday's edition, as a matter of fact, of the New York Times. Dateline Washington, Congress says in a new report, the Pentagon defied the law as well as the Constitution by spending, listen now, hundreds of millions of dollars on military projects that lawmakers never approved, including a super-secret Air Force program. The Pentagon acknowledged that some of the accusations Wednesday night were honest mistakes, which led to its failure to notify Congress about the way it was spending money. Now, Nick, that's kind of interesting. That's front page of New York Times. Our own government admitting they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're sort of saying here that, sorry, it was a mistake, we forgot to notify you. Hundreds of millions on secret projects.
Yeah, things like that, when they happen, are very unfortunate. But I have... bureaucracy wins over conspiracy every time. And the truth of it is that within government, just the same as within society as a whole, in business, in family affairs, people make mistakes. And I tend to be more charitable towards that. Because
well,
I
that's
think,
because you're in government. You're a bureaucrat.
It's human nature. People, government is a complicated business, and with the best will in the world, these things happen. But in my experience, people within the government and the military are all fundamentally honest, decent people.
Mm-hmm. That, of course, really is true. So, if there is a conspiracy, it's well held. All right.
Yes, I think so.
Wild Hard Line, you're on the air with Nick Pope in London. Hello.
Hi. I just about fell out of my chair when I heard the last call because it reflects something that I'm going through right now.
You're having a nosebleed.
I'm having more than a nosebleed. I'm having a nose geyser.
A nose geyser? Oh, my.
About 3 months ago. And let me preface at the outset that I have no recollection of any little green man or being swept away or anything like that. About 3 months ago, I started undergoing some psychological changes, a much more relaxed view of things, much less uptight than I've been for most of my 47 years. That corresponded with a huge divot in my left nostril, as if something that had been there for a long time had been removed. As it happens, I went to an otolaryngologist, which is a $3 word for an eye, ear, nose, and throat guy, on Wednesday, and the guy examined me, seemed to be very agitated, gave me some saline solution, told me there was basically nothing wrong with me, but couldn't explain why my nose has been bleeding profusely all day long for 3 months.
My God. And you say there's a definite divot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is almost ready to break through to the other side. I mean, I have the kind of gash in there that long-term cocaine users get, and I've never touched the stuff.
Nick?
Well, yeah, I think that's fascinating. And the thing which really made me, stop and think that this could be an abduction case is that you said that you had some psychological changes.
Let me interject here, if I may. These abduction cases tend to be where the same specimen is, in effect, taken several times, right?
Well, nobody knows. I mean, there are many different things going on, and not all abductees will have implants.
I had a reason for asking that question. Over my lifetime, I've had some odd things that I couldn't explain. Let me give you one example. This is going back 25 years. I used to live in Orange County in upstate New York, and for any of the listeners in New York State, they'll be familiar with the Wallkill River. On one night when I was driving home from my bus stop, I worked in New York City at the time, I was making a hairpin turn around the Wallkill River on a night when it was snowing and icing, and I was going like all of a sudden, the car was at a dead stop. I was so close to the edge that I couldn't get out of the car. I had stopped. I climbed over the stick shift in the middle, got out the other side, stopped, and there was nothing. The thing is, you talk about missing time. Yeah. I had a sense of missing time. Not minutes, not hours. As if months were missing. And yet, from that point on, I drove home, and there was no missing time at all.
Well, you know what, sir? Based on what you've told me, I would say that you should get yourself to somebody like John Mack as quickly as you can. That's really what I would recommend. If you really want to know what happened to you, go to somebody who's really good in this field. John Mack is really good, or somebody.
How do I go about reaching him?
He's at Harvard. At his level, somebody at his level. Tell him what you have told us just now, and begin to find out what happened to you. What do you think? Nick, what his advice?
Yeah, I think that it could well happen. When you have two things happen together, when you have three things, when you have time, when you have an unexplained incident like that, when you have the nosebleed, and when you have the transformation in your life, in your outlook, all these things individually, you know, you can make excuses for. But when all these things happen together, I think it could well be a sign of an abduction. And I agree, it's worth seeking out someone like John Mack, Bud Hopkins, Dave Jacobs, you know, to look into this.
I'm going to have David Jacobs on next week, caller.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Yep.
Okay, so stay in contact, but that is a remarkable story, and that's the first nose geyser I've heard of.
I'd like to relate a story that happened to me. I'm a former police officer from a major Southern California city.
Yes, sir.
And a routine night, I was working third shift, and I got a call. It was like 1:30 in the morning, and I responded, and I keep a log in my. I used to keep a log in my unit. The time I got the call, the time I got there, the time I left.
Right.
And it was a routine call. In fact, I never even got out of my car. It lasted maybe a minute and a half, and I left. And this is like 1:30 in the morning. My next recollection was about an hour and 50 minutes later, and I'd driven through, out of my jurisdiction, our jurisdiction, through another city, and just inside a third city. I don't remember doing that. What I do remember is waking up.
You were alone in a patrol car.
Well, there's a catch to my story.
All right.
So after that happened, it's not like anybody was out looking for me, but I do know that 4 other officers did for my calls that were on my beat. And so I drove back and basically was non-functional for like a week.
Well, you probably thought you were in big trouble. Fortunately,
only went to a certain level. What happened? It never left our squad. I think it went to my sergeant. I'm sure it went to the lieutenant too. But it never left. It just went to a certain level. And
Did you write it up?
as best I could at the time, but as time went on, I remembered more details of what happened. And that was like right after I left that original call.
What did you begin to remember?
What I remember is leaving the call, and I remember there's a hill. I drove up the hill and made a right-hand turn, and I remember what sounded like driving through broken glass. Or either that or somebody taking their hand and crushing the back of my windshield in the unit. Breaking glass.
Right.
And driving into a black hole. And the next thing I remember is waking up. Is about I think it was 22 miles away.
Holy smokes.
Right. Yeah, this is quite typical. And the feeling of disorientation as well is something that I've come across before. I have a case here in England involving missing time of about 3.5 hours, where somebody, two people in a car this time, which is quite unusual for these experiences, found themselves, one moment they were driving along the freeway, the next moment they were in a city center. These things happen, and the more people come forward and speak out, particularly people who have had responsible positions in the community, the quicker I think the public at large will see that we are dealing with a real phenomenon.
Are you tempted, sir, to seek somebody, as we've been talking to the other callers like John Mack or Bud Hopkins or somebody or another, to try and get to the bottom of what, fill in the empty spots?
Yes, Art, I am, especially as time goes on. And I have talked to other people about it, not publicly, but I have talked to other people about it. But let me go back to the catch of my story.
Sure.
I had a partner.
You had a partner?
Yes, I was not alone.
You had a partner in the vehicle?
In the vehicle.
And proceed, please.
Okay. Like I said, when I woke up, I was in another neighborhood, which I did not recognize right away.
Right.
And when I woke up, I picked my head up. My unit was in drive, and the engine was running. And the first thing I did, as I cleared the fog, I looked to my right, and I looked at my partner. And I stared at him for 5 seconds, and he picked his head up.
So he was gone, too?
Yes. But neither one of us said anything to each other. In fact, he wasn't my partner. He was in training, a new guy, and I didn't know who he was. I knew of him, but I didn't really know who he was. And that's the only night we worked together. And we didn't say anything, and I think I understand why, because I felt stupid. That was because I was totally confused. I felt stupid, and I believe that he felt like he fell asleep and didn't know what was going on.
Do you know where this man is now?
He's still there.
He's still there?
Yeah.
I think I would be tempted to try and contact him and have a discussion about the experience now.
Yeah, I wish I did at the time, but we're busy. I lost track of him, even that week, and I don't know where he went or who he was working with.
Well, that's a remarkable story. So I would seek some help. I would try and get in touch with your partner, and I don't know what else to tell you except that is just an astounding story. And
it's a great story, and I think that's very good advice. Yeah.
Nick, do you have any idea? You mentioned that they seem to be interested in our sexual nature, our reproduction. Others have said in our genetic structure. There's a group of people who believe that the Greys or whoever they are have a weakened genetic structure, and they're trying to strengthen their genetic structure by mixing it with ours. Do you have any beliefs in this area about what's going on?
I think that all these things could be going on in parallel. I think it's very unlikely that simply one facet of human behavior is going to be of interest to these people. So I would not rule out a scenario where they are interested in all these things. And also, and this is something I keep coming back to because it crops up in my caseload, they are very, very interested in human relationships, how we bond with people, how a mother bonds with a child, how we form friendships, how we form sexual relationships. These are focuses of their interest.
It is very, very, very interesting that you should say that, because I had a man on the air who does remote viewing not long ago named Ed Dames.
Oh, yeah.
And, oh, you know Ed?
I've not met him, but I know his work.
I know of his work.
Yes.
What he said was that he has determined that it would be possible for a very serious research group, NIDS, here in the U.S., sponsored by Bob Bigelow, who I'm going to have on the air next week for the first time ever on radio.
Excellent. Yes, I'm very familiar with NIDS, and I've spoken to Bob Bigelow and Tom Kelleher.
Indeed. Yes, and I had Mr. Kelleher on a couple of weeks ago, and he spoke about a ranch they have at an undisclosed location. We don't want to give it out.
Sure.
Where some very unusual things occurred. And Ed Dames felt that one way to attract, or the way he put it, to set bait, would be to put a mother and an infant at a specific location on this ranch. And that there was something about the bonding, Ed Dames said, between the mother and an infant that would attract them.
I think that's right. Now, NIDS are doing some excellent work, and in many ways, I think, are putting money into something which a lot of people think the government should be doing. However, I think we have to be very careful with the moral implications of using that. Now, I'm sure NIDS will, if they do that ever, they will do it responsibly. But I think we need to be very careful about offering people as bait.
Well, as a matter of fact, in behalf of NIDS, Colonel John Alexander called in during that program and said, you know, there was actually a mother and an infant on the ranch, and they were removed because of perceived danger to them.
That's excellent. I'm so glad to hear that, and that allies with everything I know about NIDS and how responsibly they handle that.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Absolutely.
Because we need to establish open two-way conversation with the extraterrestrials. That's what we should really be aiming to do.
But you agree, then, that human relationships, the bonding, is something they're apparently very interested in.
They're very interested in it, and one reason may be because they can't do it themselves, or they're not good at it, or they've lost the ability to do it. It may be our very humanity, what makes us individual, which is the most precious thing in the universe.
Maybe far more so than we know, because, of course, to us it is a natural thing. Fascinating, fascinating. East of the Rockies, without a lot of time, you're on the air with Nick Pope in London. Hello.
Oh, hello there. This is Gary down in Hope Sound, Florida.
Hi, Gary.
Hi. Yeah, my question is, I had missed, I had a missing time thing in the early 70s when I went hunting one day. I lost a full day. But my question is, I've noticed, looking back since then, seems like I have a harder time sleep. I seem to be more of a night owl since then. I used to sleep very regular hours, and my tendency is to nap more during the day and sleep less at night. And I wondered if that has followed through. That's one question. Followed through with many of the people that have missing time.
Well, if that's...
Yes, a lot of people are perhaps subconsciously, if they can't remember the details of what happened, nervous that it may happen again. So that's one explanation.
Yeah. And my other question is, since you are on the inside of government, it seems like the media pretty much controls the public's perception of everything. And the media, I think on this side of the pond, is pretty cold when it comes to these topics. are very skeptical whenever they want to talk about anything in this genre. First thing they want to do is bring in somebody to debunk it all.
That's right.
And they call it in the interest of fairness. And what do you perceive as being a way that this finally start moving forward past this scenario?
All right.
What can the public do to start?
Equal participation wins. A Mexico City government, that's right, government agency, should draw attention to the fact that housewives.
Hear it. Incidentally, you're about to hear a government where this is really something else. Now, would anybody in our government do this? No way. But the gentleman you're about to hear, Nick Pope, from Great Britain, has worked for the Ministry of Defense since 1985. And he's going to come on the air with us. And he's going to talk about UFOs. He's going to talk about open skies, closed minds, uninvited.
But for somebody to be able to come on from the government, shocking to me, and I'll tell you more about it. Force conducted its great project. As if to have the final word said on the whole thing, not a national security. In this country, Nick, we have reports of UFOs that have hovered above ICBM hardened installations. We have reports of ICBM sites that have gone offline with UFOs hovering above them. The Russians have had reports of ICBM sites beginning their own countdown. That aired here on national television. And I've always thought, Nick, if that is not a matter of national, in fact, international security, then what is?
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think, let's not beat around the bush. I mean, Blue Book was, a pretty much a whitewash. And the American government's decision to get out of the UFO game, if they did, was pretty perverse, given that over 20% of the Blue Book cases were unexplainable. And I'm not talking about cases where there was insufficient data. But yeah, we have near misses between UFOs and aircraft, some of which are military aircraft. We here have cases involving UFOs hovering over power stations and even nuclear installations on occasion. Yeah, I think that this is an issue of extreme defense significance, and that is fundamentally the reason why I wrote the book. And yes, I was taking a chance in doing it, but I felt that it was just too important to sit back and do nothing when these things are going on.
Well, again, since you work for the Ministry of Defense, without giving me specifics
about the things that you cannot talk about, how many or incidences have occurred that percentage-wise that you would not be able to tell me about right now?
Well, I could pretty much tell you about most of the cases, although some in fairly sanitized form. What I can say to you is that when I was doing the UFO job for the government, I investigated about 300 cases a year. And of those cases, I reckon about 10%, so maybe 30 cases a year, gave me serious cause for concern, made me think we were dealing with structured craft capable of speeds and maneuverabilities that we simply could not match.
When you were tasked with the job,
this was a subject that it didn't do to look into too closely. It was regarded either as a nuisance or as something where once you started digging, who knows where it will end. So I'm not telling you that I was ever warned off or discouraged or anything like that, but I think it was kind of accepted that, whoever did that job was just supposed to kind of not rock the boat.
All right. Well, I want to just go off to the right here for a second and ask you a question that you might not be able to answer. But you had a tour of duty in the Joint Operations Center during the Gulf War.
Yes.
And a pretty significant one. In America, we have a great controversy raging, Nick, about our GIs who came back
of various and sundry ailments called the Gulf War Syndrome. And I wonder if there is a similar thing going on in Great Britain, and if so, what you know about it.
There is indeed a similar controversy, but I'm afraid that's not something on which I can comment. It's nothing. I have not done any official research or investigation into that, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to pass up that one.
Okay.
The perils of working for the government, I'm afraid.
No. I understand, and sometimes it is as important to get a no comment as it is to get one. Now, coming back to you.
Welcome to Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring Coast to Coast AM from May 31st, 2001.
From the high desert in the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be across this great land of ours and well beyond. Commercially, from the island of Guam in the Pacific, Iraq, eastward to the Caribbean and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and our rocks south into South America, north all the way to the pole and worldwide on the internet. This is Coast to Coast to Coast to Coast to Coast AM. Hi there, everybody. Welcoming yet another new affiliate tonight. That would be KTXX in Salinas, California. 1460 on the dial in Salinas. I know that area well. And I'd like to say hello to Jeff Wilson, who's the general manager there, and Corey Michaels. Both of these people are really nice guys. So there you have it, yet another new one getting that close to 500 affiliates. KTXX Salinas, 1460. So if you're in the area, check them out. Just wait till you hear what you've got in store for you. Even I don't know. First of all, new on the website tonight, something pretty cool. I don't know whether you knew this or not, but I'm kind of friends with Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top. And Billy wrote me a letter, wrote Ramona and I a letter, and with it sent a photograph that is so cool. I had no idea Billy was doing this. Billy went up in the Vomit Comet and experienced weightlessness. God, I would love to do that. I wonder how much it costs to go up in that thing. Anyway, we've got a copy of the letter that he sent to us, to Ramona and myself, and that we've got a photograph of Billy in the Vomit Comet. And then, if you keep going down a little bit, you're going to see a wonderful article. But in the middle, between the letter and the photograph, you will see Vomit Comet video, 800K, MPEG. And in that, you will see Billy Gibbons floating in the air with his guitar floating above his head. Pretty cool stuff. So, all right for you, Billy. Billy, let me know, will you, what it costs to do that? That's something I'd really, really, really love to do. If even, just once, get up there and what do you suppose weightlessness is really like? I have no idea. The closest thing that we, I guess, can experience on Earth to weightlessness, obviously, is diving in a pool or in the ocean or in water, right? Weightless, sort of, but not quite the same thing as just floating in air. Just floating in the air. Can you imagine that? Well, Billy did it. So we've got the letter, we've got the photograph, and we've got the video, courtesy of ZZ Top's Billy Gibbons. Now, McVeigh, I see, indeed, today asked a judge to delay his execution, which is strange. I don't get it. He wanted to die, right? And then the FBI came along and said, well, we've got these documents, but they don't bear on guilt. And now he wants to delay his own execution, so I don't know. Maybe as he got closer to meeting with whoever he's going to meet when that time comes, he decided he'd rather put it off for a while. Senator James Jeffords, who last week left the Republican Party, has decided to give all his money back to those who supported him when he ran for office. An honorable thing to do, I guess. And that'd probably be a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to run for the Senate, millions and millions of dollars. President Bush would like a military spending increase. In 2002, in addition to the $5.6 billion hike he is planning for the current Pentagon budget, it would seem that he wants even more. So he might add even more to his originally proposed $310 billion budget. And so I don't know. What are we doing? Who is it we are protecting against? The Chinese, sure, to some degree, I guess. But it seems to me with the Soviet bloc gone, And they really are gone. I mean, they are just absolutely clueless, moneyless, without any clear political direction. They're just gone. Yes, the nukes are still there, of course. But it seems to me a time that we would not necessarily be increasing our military budget, maybe holding steady, but I don't know about increasing. Huh? But that's what they're going to do. We are going to do a program tonight on the shadow people. And there is a lady who contacted me, a doctor, Morgan Spence, who said she has been researching the shadow people for 11 years. She has a new website up. It just went up. We've got a link on our site. It should be here in the next hour. But I thought I would read you the following letter. And this is just plucked out among thousands and thousands and thousands of letters. Art, I would like to start off by respectfully requesting that my name, location, and company be withheld should you choose to air any of my theory as to the cause of the increased sightings of shadow people. And he goes on to explain where he works. He is a very technical person, let me tell you. I'm withholding the information. Very technical person. He says his job requires him to report accurately and technically.
Now, we've still got a 3-hour drive back. We're not going to be home until after midnight.
Well, if it really bugged you, Johnny, you wouldn't do it.
You think I want to blow Sunday on a scene like this? You know, I figure we're either going to have to move Mother out here or move the grave into Pittsburgh.
She can't make a trip like this.
Oh, darn it, she can't. Is there any of that candy left?
No.
Look at this thing. We still remember. I don't. You know, I don't even remember what the man looks like.
Johnny, it takes you 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes to put the wreath on the grave and 6 hours to drive back and forth. Mother wants to remember, so we trot 200 miles into the country and she stays at home.
Well, we're here, John, all right?
Test. Back on. Oh. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming back on the air after an interruption due to technical problems.
There's nothing wrong with the radio. Must have been the station.
Which row is it in? There it is.
I wonder what happened to the one from last year. Each year we spend good money on these things. We come out here and the one from last year's gone.
Well, the flowers die, and the caretaker or somebody takes them away.
Yeah, a little spit and polish. You can clean this up. Sell it next year. Wonder how many times we bought the same one. Hey, come on, Barb. Church was this morning, huh? Hey, I mean, praying's for church, huh? Come on.
I haven't seen you in church lately.
Well, there's not much sense in my going to church. Do you remember one time when we were small, we were out here? It was from right over there. I jumped out at you from behind the tree, and Grandpa got all excited, and he shook his fist at me, and he said, "Boys, you'll be damned to hell." Remember that? Right over there. Well, you used to really be scared here.
Johnny.
You're still afraid.
Stop it now. I mean it.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
He'll hear you.
Here he comes now. I'm getting out of here.
Johnny.
Don't worry about him. I can handle him. Probably be a lot more of them as soon as they find out about us. The truck is out of gas. This pump out here is locked. Is there a key? We can try to get out here if we can get some gas. Is there a key? I suppose you tried this. Do you live here? We've got to get out of here. We have to get where there's some other people. Maybe we better take some food. I'll see if I can find some food.
He came slowly, and Johnny kept teasing me and saying, "He's coming to get you, Barbara." And I laughed at him and said, "Johnny, stop it." And then Johnny ran away. And I went up to this man, and I was going to apologize.
joined their facilities in an emergency network to bring you this news as it develops. We urge you to stay tuned to radio and TV and to stay indoors at all costs. Late reports reaching this newsroom tell of frightened people seeking refuge in churches, schools, and government buildings demanding shelter. Apparently is engulfing much of the nation.
This place is boarded up pretty solid now. We ought to be all right here for a while. We have the gun and bullets, food and the radio. Sooner or later, someone bound to come and get us out. Hey, that's us. We're doing all right. Look, I don't know if you're hearing me, but I'm going upstairs now. If anything should try to break in here, I can hear it from up there. I'll be down to take care of it. Everything is all right for now. I'll be back to reinforce the windows and doors later. But you'll be all right for now, okay? Okay.
Civil defense officials in Cumberland have told newsmen that murder victims show evidence of having been partially devoured.
chance when we got a safe place? We luck into a safe place, and you're telling us we got to risk our lives just because somebody might need help, huh?
Yeah, something like that.
All right, why don't we settle this, mister? How many of those things are in here?
We can't get in here.
You got the whole place boarded up?
Yeah, most of it. All the few spots upstairs. They won't be hard to fix.
You're insane. The cellar's the safest place.
I'm telling you, they can't get in here.
And I'm telling you, those things turned over our car. We were damn lucky to get away at all. Now, you tell me those things can't get through this lousy pile of wood? His wife and kids downstairs. Kids hurt.
Well, I still think we're better off up here.
We could strengthen everything up. The cellar is the strongest place.
The cellar is a death trap.
I don't know, Mr. Cooper.
You boxed yourself in the cellar, those things get out. Now here you have a...
Fix these boards. You're crazy. Those things are going to be at every window and door in this place. We've got to get down into the cellar.
Go down in that damn cellar. Get out of here!
I'm taking the girl with me.
Leave her here. your hands off her. And everything else is up here, too. Because if I stay up here, I'm fighting for everything up here. And the radio and the food is part of what I'm fighting for. Now, if you're going down the cellar, get it.
The man's insane. He's insane. We've got to have food down there. We've got a right.
This is your house.
We've got a right.
You going down there with him?
Well,
yes or no? This is your last chance. No beating around the bush.
Listen, I got a kid down there. She can't possibly. I couldn't bring her up here. She can't possibly take all the racket and those things smashing through the windows.
Well, you're her father. If you're stupid enough to go die in that trap, that's your business. However, I am not stupid enough to follow you. It is tough for the kid that old man is so stupid. Now, get the hell down in the cellar. You can be the boss down there. I'm boss up here.
You bastards. You know, I won't open this door again. I mean it. Mr. Cooper, with your help, we could... With my help?
Let him go, man. His mind is made up. Just let him go.
Wait a minute. Judy, come on up here. We're gonna let them get hurt too, huh? It's all right. Go ahead.
If we stick together, man, we can fix it up real good. There's lots of places we can run to up here. Mr. Cooper, we'd all be a lot better off. All three of us were working together.
Hey. Hey, kid.
He's wrong, you know. I'm not boxing myself in down there.
On the air day and night.
Well, we're safe now. Put it up tight. There, let him. There are two other people upstairs, a man and a girl.
We heard you screaming.
Yeah, but I didn't know who they were, and I wasn't about to take any unnecessary chances.
Of course not, Harry.
Is she all right?
I don't know what it is. She feels warm. Maybe it's shock.
Where'd you get the bandage?
Some laundry in a basket. I tore a sheet.
Let them stay upstairs. Let them. Too many ways those monsters can get in up there. We'll see who's right. We'll see when they come begging me to let them in down here.
That's important, isn't it?
What?
To be right, everybody else to be wrong.
What do you mean by that?
Does anyone up there know why we're being attacked?
Whatever it is, it isn't just happening here. It's some kind of mass murder. It's going on everywhere. The radio said to stay inside.
Radio?
Radio upstairs. I heard a news bulletin.
There's a radio upstairs and you boarded us in down here?
I know what I'm doing.
What did it say?
Nothing. Nothing. They don't know anything yet, but...
brother was killed.
Hey, give me a hand with this thing.
I gotta go help Ben with the television.